Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Parenting Through the Parsha with Rabbi Matt Shapiro.
It's inevitable, and I would say important, that our relationships will evolve over time. That with friends, siblings, significant others, and yes, parents and children, the relationships that I hold today are different than the relationships as they were 5 years ago, and different still than the relationships they will be 5, 10, 15, etc. years from now. And it's interesting to note that both just as a more objective observer to see how that happens, but also living into that, seeing that as something that is an opportunity and an invitation to intentionally shape and mold what those relationships can be. The experience that comes to mind for me is just about a year ago. I'd been reading this book about the movie Airplane. Surely I can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. And Jonah saw me reading it, my oldest, and he was asking me about it, and I was telling him about it. And he wanted to see it, and it's hard with like the inner siblings. When can we carve out some time? And it was showing at a local movie theater, and I saw it, and I bought a ticket, and I took him to see it, just the two of us, and we both really enjoyed it. Hard to tell who enjoyed it more, but we both really enjoyed it. And that's not something that I would have done with him when he was 5 or 8 or 10, but it's something I did with him when he was 12. And there's a band that's coming to town in a couple of months that I'm excited to see. And it's like, well, maybe I'll take Jonah to see the show with me, right? He's getting to an age where we can start doing things like this together. And it's not just that that's a cool and fun thing to be able to start to do with one of my kids, but by inviting him into that part of my life, that's also inviting a different type of relationship and a different way of connecting. And by doing that intentionally and by thinking about what that can be, that's a way of building our relationship and seeing how it can grow. It makes me think a little bit about this idea of the different names that we can hold. Names, of course, he's still going to call me Abba, I think, for now, but names are also ways in which we manifest in the world, the different identities that we can hold, that different people are going to call me different names. And, well, the truth of the matter is, I have nicknames for my kids, they have nicknames for me, and those nicknames can evolve over time too. And I'm thinking about names because in the Parsha this week, we hear about the different names that God can have. That at the very beginning of the Parsha, the beginning of Vaera, God says to Moses, I am the Lord, right? I am Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, usually translated as the Lord, the holiest name for God. But it's interesting because earlier on in that verse, it says Vaydaber Elohim, which is a different name for God. And then the next verse, God says to Moses, I revealed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, which is a different name for God. So another way of saying these verses would be, and Bob said to his friend, I am Steve, but your other friends, they knew me as Daniel, right? Which wouldn't seem to make much sense. How can one person be saying, I'm all three of these names? And of course, our commentators get into it and they talk about how, well, one is a different aspect of God that was revealed to the forefathers, that was the God of might, and this is going to be the God of liberation. El Shaddai, you can connect it with the Hebrew word of dai, which means enough. So this is the God that was enough for them. And a number of our sages talk about how the Tetragrammaton, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, is the God of was, is, and will be, and that since the Israelites are going to be leaving Egypt and will be seeing the fruition of that vision, that's different than what happened with the patriarchs, that they were told that the Israelites would be redeemed, but they didn't see it themselves. Whereas with this group, they're going to see the redemption, they're going to see their liberation from Egypt. So it's a different name that's being used for God in this context. And that's interesting then to think about in the realm of the way in which relationships evolve over time, that through the name that's being used, it's telling you something different about that person. There's a book I really love called God, a Biography by Jack Miles that's already over 20 years old. And his thesis is that the Tanakh, our Bible, is one large interconnected narrative with God as the protagonist. And that the story of the Tanakh is God figuring out how to be in relationship with people. And so then the different names layering that on is God trying to figure out, okay, who am I in relationship to these people right now? And by revealing a different name, God's revealing a different aspect of God's self. And so then, yeah, it's interesting to think about this idea. There's, of course, a common metaphor of God as parent and different figures or the people of Israel or the world in a parent-child relationship to God. So what does it mean if God is in this mode of revealing different aspects of God's self through those names? What does that then mean for us of the ways in which we can think about the parts of ourselves that we want to reveal to about who we are to our kids and how we think about that? And just as God offers real limitations in terms of revealing the fullness of who God is to humanity, I don't know that it's necessarily healthy to reveal each and every single aspect of who I am to my kids. There are probably some pieces of myself that should stay with peers or with significant others and shouldn't necessarily be told to my kids, certainly when they're children themselves. But it is interesting to think about this from an identity perspective for me, that in order for me to have a choice in that, I need to have a really clear sense of who I am. I need to have a really clear sense of the different parts of myself and to bring those together into some type of coherent identity. Because then once I have that, I can have more agency and more intentionality in choosing what I want to bring my kids in on, how I want to spend time with them in this way. Oh, now you're 12, we can see this movie. We're 13, we can, right? The identity piece, if there's more awareness on my end, that can in turn offer more intentionality and choice and foresight in terms of thinking about how I want to be in relationship with my kids, and truthfully, not just with my kids, but with the people who matter to me in my life generally. And that agency in terms of what to conceal and what to reveal and what to offer and what to keep elsewhere, that can bring a larger sense of integrity into the world, into the way I walk in it, and that can hopefully be a holy thing.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.